Taking a good look at today's rock and roll. Some people think we ought to start rating those lyrics in movies. Let's find out. Well, good morning, and thanks once again for joining us in this, the Weekend Sunday program. This one, a special event coming to you from right here in Boston's Quincy Market. We're going to be introducing you to a lot of folks down here in just a couple of minutes about this morning's topic, and that has to do with rock and roll, the kinds of lyrics that our children are listening to these days, and the kind of album covers, and maybe especially the kind of film videos they're seeing on MTV. Now, if you're a fan of those rock and roll lyrics, or you're a parent who's fed up with the kinds of bill of fare that your children are being fed these days, then you'll want to stay tuned to this program, because we'll be joined by a lot of special guests and folks in our audience who think something ought to be done. Maybe a rating on the records, and maybe making it more difficult for your children to hang around watching MTV. We'll give you all that information when we come back, but first, here's our report from our weekend editor, Gloria Chun.
I think it's a good idea that records should be rated. Movies are rated, everything else in entertainment is rated, and I feel that records should be rated as well.
I really don't think any kind of label on a record is going to make any kind of difference in our society. As long as there are commercials that push sex.
Records and movies and everything else should be rated on an individual basis and not by some person's individual opinion. I'm totally against it.
Scenes like these are appearing on MTV and other cable music video channels such as V66 here in Massachusetts. And often scenes of sadomasochism, Satanism, and violence are interspersed with some lyrics that leave little to the imagination.
Rock and roll lyrics have come a long way since Tutti Frutti and Rock Around the Clock. But some groups like the Motley Crue, Judas Priest, and Prince have written lyrics that I can't even read over the air. The Paris Music Resource Center of Washington, D.C. would like to do something about these lyrics in the form of ratings, like movie ratings, which would warn parents about the material that are on albums that their kids are buying.
The Parents Music Resource Center, founded by some well-connected Washington wives, Treasury Secretary James Baker's wife Susan, and Senator Albert Gore's wife Tipper, helped to stage Senate hearings on the lyrics, hoping for ratings.
Rock lyrics have turned from "I can't get no satisfaction" to "I'm going to force you at gunpoint to eat me alive."
One musician in the center of the controversy, Twisted Sister.
Only sadomasochism, bondage, and rape in this song is in the mind of Ms. Gore.
Recently, Dave Finnegan talked with Sonny Joe White of KISS 108 Radio about the responsibilities of disc jockeys in playing rock music.
I think the big controversy is over the fact that they aren't hearing it on radio stations, and they aren't seeing it so much on the MTVs, but what they're doing is they're hearing the better songs, the good tunes without the controversial lyrics on the radio, and then when they go to a record store, they buy the album, and surprise, they've got some lyrics and they've got some cuts that are controversial. The record companies do have a responsibility to put a warning on certain records that have adult content or an album that may have sexual explicit content through the lyrics. And I think, to the record companies' defense, that there are record companies that are doing that already.
But wouldn't it be reasonable to say that some of these lyrics, sadomasochism, strong sexual content, graphically sexual content, wouldn't it be reasonable just to say to people who sell records, you can't sell them to children under the age of 17?
I think that when you start labeling it specifics, you start, number one, drawing the attention. The kids, once they see anything labeled sexual or they see it drug content, those are the LPs that they're going to be drawn to just like a magnet, I think. I think the other side of that is that you're also getting to the point where you're censoring a lot of material. And I think that's where the problem's coming in. I think that the Washington wives are looking for an easy way out of raising their children.
Are you saying that the Washington wives are being self-serving here, that they're doing themselves a lot of good by associating themselves with this cause?
I think there's even a bigger responsibility here, David, that's being overlooked. That responsibility is that parents have to start being parents again, okay? KISS 108, MTV cannot babysit your kids. We can, however, make sure that something like the Motley Crue or something like the Quiet Riot isn't on our airwaves. I think we're doing a good job with that. I think parents have to get back into being parents.
All right, that'll set a tone for this morning's discussion. Let me introduce you to our special guest here this morning before we go much further. Sally Nevius is with us. Now, Sally represents the group known as Parents Music Resource Center. In fact, you are the Washington Wives that everybody refers to, and you're probably better known by that title than you are by this one, Sally. Also seated next to me here is Oedipus. He's a disc jockey over at Big Time Rock Station, WBCN, right here in Boston, and he'll be giving us his viewpoints on this subject. And joining us, too, over the telephone lines is Frank Zappa. Frank used to be with the Mothers of Invention. He is a big-time rock star, if there ever was one. He's also the author of a song called Catholic Girls, which caused some controversy just a few short years ago, as Oedipus is evidencing at this particular moment. Let's start with you, Oedipus, if we can. I know the burden is with Sally's group because she wants to change the status quo, but don't some of these lyrics strike you as things that ought not be heard by kids of 12, 13, 14, 15?
I think the parents should determine that, and not myself or the artist.
Well, what about the parents who do determine that? What discipline can they invoke to see that their kid doesn't tune into BCN? I mean, how are they going to prevent them from hearing you?
They can monitor what WBCN plays, or they can listen to the records that their kids buy. We're responsible broadcasters, so they won't have a problem with what they hear on WBCN. If they're offended by a song, Catholic Girls, then they probably shouldn't listen to WBCN.
Yeah, but I guess the argument from the parents would be that they can't monitor their children 24 hours a day, and therefore they don't really have the ability to tell them what to listen to and what not to listen to.
Well, in terms of radio, we're regulated by the FCC. We have specific guidelines that we follow. In terms of records, no one's forcing the parents to allow their children to play it on their turntables.
All right, let me read a lyric here, because sometimes we talk without the lyrics and we don't really get a flavor for what the problem is all about. How about this one? This is from Defenders of the Faith, an album which sold 2 million copies, and I want you to think we were reaching for something that wasn't popular. And the song is called Eat Me Alive. Sally, Nevius, and Frank, you're listening. Eat Me Alive sounds like an animal panting to the beat, grown in the pleasure zone, gasping from the heat. Gut-wrenching frenzy that destroys every joint. I'm going to force you at gunpoint to eat me alive. Now, your response. You obviously think that these things ought to be controlled somewhat. Am I right, these lyrics?
What we are saying is not so much control, is we want parents to have a tool so they can make a judgment and decide whether this is appropriate for their children.
All right, but how are they going to do that, Sally?
Well, they can only do it if there's some form of a label, and that's really all we're asking for. We're not asking for a rating system. We originally asked for a rating system, as did the National PTA. But we've talked with the president of the Recording Industry Association of America, Stanley Gordakoff. We've had good negotiations with him. We've had good responses from Eddie Fritt, who's president of the National Association of Broadcasters. And logistically, they said it's a problem to put ratings on. And so we said we would agree to a form of label, just one generic label.
Right.
It's just a warning to parents. They would say something like explicit lyrics, parental advisory.
Let's see what Frank Zappa has to say about that. Frank, how would you like one of your albums coming out with a label on it that says either PG-18, sexually explicit material, or what? How would you feel about it?
Well, first of all, I've had an interesting label on my last couple of albums. I put a nice big yellow and orange sticker on there that says, "Warning guarantee, this album contains material that a truly free society would neither fear nor suppress." And then it goes on to guarantee you that if you hear what's in it, you won't go to hell. But the thing that's
Is that a personal guarantee, Frank, or one that you borrowed from somebody else?
What?
Is that a personal guarantee?
That's my personal guarantee, and it's as real as the threats of the video fundamentalists who use rock music as a crutch to raise money for whatever nefarious purposes they're raising it for. But the thing that I'd like to point out is that from what Sally says right now, the arrangement that they have arrived at with Stanley Gordakoff and the RIAA seems to be exactly what Gordakoff offered prior to the Senate hearings. And if that is satisfactory now, why was it not satisfactory prior to taking it to the Senate?
Let me see if I can get Sally to respond to that. Is it the same thing that you were offered prior to going to the Senate?
We're in the process of settling this agreement. We're very close to it, as a matter of fact. But what we're asking for is not only to have a label, but we're also asking for lyrics to be available. In fact, Frank Zappa and I, we're exactly in agreement in this. That we want a label, he does a label.
Wait a minute,
we
the
want
Washington
lyrics.
Wives and Frank Zappa are exactly in agreement, Frank?
Yeah, wait a minute.
Yeah, I mean, I want to know the answer to that, Frank, before we go any further.
He uses a label, and that's what we're asking for. We're asking for a label also.
No, I never asked for a label. Let me tell you.
Well, he uses his own label.
Yeah,
And
but
what
his
we're
own label is
saying-
making fun of your label, it seems to
Well,
me.
we're asking that the record companies put the label on. This is not a label that we come up with a definition of what's appropriate or what's not appropriate. We put this in the hands of the recording industry. We're not even asking to serve on a panel. We're just saying you come up with a definition that would define what would be explicit lyrics, then let each individual record company
Let me pin you
decide.
down. The one I just read, Eat Me Alive, would you say that, your own personal opinion now, would you say that's one day that I think we ought to have a sexually explicit label on and smack it right on the front of that album? Is that one?
Well, let me say that we don't want to get into the business of rating.
Oh, yeah, I know. That's why I'm not asking you to become a public sensitive. Your
But it
personal
is.
opinion.
It's explicit. Of course it's explicit.
Okay, so you would think. Frank, what about you? What do you feel about that?
Well, first of all, I resent the idea of any third party, whether it's inside the industry, whether it's from the Senate, or whether it's from a committee or any place, making decisions of that nature. See, let's look at what the desired result is here. If the desired result is alerting people to the fact that today in rock and roll, lyrics are different than Tutti Frutti, I think that the last 6 months of media blitz coming from the PMRC has sufficiently warned any concerned parent in the United States that those lyrics are lurking out there. And if you're the kind of a parent that doesn't want your kids to hear that, you got one easy solution that requires no legislation or pain and strain, and that's
so to agree,
not buy rock and roll.
So to agree, you think the job's done. Let me get Oedipus back into this. Frank seems to be saying, I want a third party involved here. Sally thinks there ought to be a third party involved. Most times when businesses, like the music industry, are being regulated, they say the same things, and what they say is, we'll self-discipline. That is, we'll discipline ourselves. What discipline takes place at your rock station, or others if you know about them, that would censor some of these in advance and say, no, we're not going to play Judas Priest in this station or whatever?
Oh, well, we would play that song. I mean, if you wanted to label that, you might label it H for humorous. I mean...
Well, I don't know if that's humorous, Oedipus, depending upon your definition of humor, but you're
well, I guess
saying
that's exactly it. If I find it humorous and she finds it offensive, how can you possibly label it?
I think that's part of the problem, obviously, and that's the problem we want to explore this morning, and that is one man's poison and you know the rest, huh?
And this is why we think it's important to let each individual record company make that decision. We're not trying to impose our values or our standards. In fact, it's just the opposite of censorship. This is truth in packaging.
But you're forcing an industry who wants to sell these albums in the same numbers that they do now to do something different in their marketing technique, and that's the soul of it, right? So that you really are forcing them to do something they don't want to do.
But it's changed in the marketplace. There's a quantum leap, Dave, between what Elvis Presley played years ago, I want you, I need you, I love you, to Prince singing, if you got no place to go, I'll take you to the movie show and I'll jack you off.
And you think that ought to mean some, that ought to mean some change in the marketplace? All right.
There's a difference.
We're going to be taking a break right about here. When we come back, we're going to be joined by our studio audience. Our special guests will be with us. And whatever happened to Moon, Tune, Spoon, and June, you'll find out. We'll be right back. We're back here now. We're taking a look at big-time rock and roll. I mean, it's the lyrics, it's the album covers, and two, the film videos. Some parents are fed up with what their children are being exposed to on a daily basis, and they want to do something about it. You met a moment ago, Sally Nevius. She heads up the Washington Wives, and Oedipus is here with us, big-time rock and roll disc jockey from WBCN here in Boston, and over the lines with us, a big-time rock and roll star himself, Frank Zappa, from the Mothers of Invention. We're broadcasting live here from the Quincy Market here in downtown Boston, also known as the fabled Quincy Market, hence this crowd behind us who are dying to be involved, I can tell. Frank, let me ask you at the top here before we go back to talk to some of these folks, what was it you said about Catholic girls that everybody got steamed up about?
As far as I know, there never was any controversy over the song Catholic Girls. I did happen to have a song called Jewish Princess, though, that upset you.
You mean after you took a run at the Catholics, you moved over to write something about Jewish princesses?
No, actually, the Jewish Princess song came first.
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
All right, well, the Catholic girls got more notoriety here in Boston, I guess. I think, Oedipus, didn't it? Did you get any controversy at your station?
No, we played them both.
You play them both?
And they were loved by both. Both were loved by the audience.
Near as I can determine that you don't care what you play. You're playing...
Well, that's not true at all. We care a great deal about what we play.
You do?
Yes.
All right.
We play quality music.
Okay, let me show a couple of albums here, and then I want Sally to show one too, okay? Let's have these. You folks have seen this album cover here. Let's start with you folks if I can. You folks are here from a group called the Concerned Women for America, right? What do you think of this album cover? This is disgusting, she says. All right, let me get over here.
Can we see that, Dave?
Yeah, sure you can. By all means. Why don't you hold it, as a matter of fact, and they can shoot it from there. And I'll talk to these folks right here. Judy, you said you think it's disgusting,
Frank,
but
it's a well-known group called the Rods that no one's ever heard of.
Well, all right,
let me eat metal. Let them eat metal.
Let them eat metal. As a parody on the old French Revolution, as we all know, which said let them eat cake.
If you want to see something really obscene,
Judy, I suppose you don't have to buy this album if you don't want it. That's the point.
Right, but I wouldn't want it in my house at all either.
Can you control your children from buying this album or tell them not to bring it in the house without telling Oedipus what to play or without telling Frank Zappa what to write?
I think with parents, the problem is we can't hear the lyrics myself. When you put the radio on, I have a hard time understanding what they're saying. So I agree with Sally that we would like the words printed so that we would know what the children are hearing, because I believe what goes in comes out. So garbage in, garbage out.
Garbage in, garbage out. Okay, let's move over here to somebody who might be listening to these. How about you, Kerry? I don't mean to sneak up on you like this, Kerry, but this could be your big chance. Stardom could be at your doorstep tomorrow morning. Let's talk to Kerry first, Steve, and then I'll talk to you. Why don't you stand up?
Okay, kids can listen to whatever they want. I mean, it's their choice. If their parents want to keep it from them, that's fine. But there's no way they can stop it. They have a radio. They buy radios for Christmas. I mean, the kids can listen to it. It's their choice, not really the parents.
So what do you think this is? Do you think this is all futile, that Sally and some of these concerned women for America are really wasting their time trying to prevent you from listening to what you want to listen to?
Definitely.
A waste of time. How do you like that? There you are, flying all the way up from Washington, Sally, and you're shot down by Kerry from Copley High School. She may have a point, though, huh? Because what she's saying is the whole thing is an exercise in futility.
Well, it's not. It is an act of futility if parents don't get involved. And one of the things that we've said to parents is don't tune out, but tune in. We're not saying that these songs shouldn't be printed. We're not saying that these songs, that the artists, they have their rights. But all we're saying is parents, we want to know what these lyrics are so that we can have a tool that we can be better parents.
But
that's all we're asking.
She's saying something, though, that makes some sense. When you do know what the lyrics are, what the heck are you going to do about it?
Well, then that's up to parents. That has to come within the framework of the home. And each family has to make that decision. But I know the parents that are aware of these lyrics are not going to let their young people either listen to them or buy them. But that's
I want to
within
follow
the
up
home.
on that point, because I don't know how you do that. I mean, as a father of 4 teenagers, I have no idea how I'm going to prevent them from sneaking into WBCN when I'm listening to HDH or BZ, whatever. Helene, what's the answer to this?
I don't think there's an answer to that. I agree with you. I don't know how you can prevent it, but I think what Sally is doing and her group is bringing an awareness to people that this is what's going on in the industry. And I don't believe in censorship myself, but I think what has to be done is the industry. I would like to see the industry itself get involved in doing something. For example, the women singers, how they can let some of these songs talk about themselves the way they do is beyond me. I'd like to see them get involved. I'd like to see the disc jockeys get involved in discriminating what is good taste and what's good for the for society of a whole. And I'm glad to hear that.
But let's not. That's the problem, that we got 2 different sense of taste here. Unless if you own WBCN, would you broadcast Eat Me Alive, Helene?
No, I wouldn't.
I suspected the answer, and yet you do. So I think Oedipus's point is well taken, and that is that they are screening and they are being careful with what they broadcast, but you still don't like it.
True.
Okay.
Maybe I just don't like their set of values.
Right, that's really the whole point. Frank Zappa, let me get you back involved here. Is it a question of a set of values? Some of the things that Helene holds near and dear to herself and to her family, you may think are silly, right?
Well, it's not for me to decide whether or not her values are silly, but I will say that because America is so diverse, you always have a choice. BCN is not the only radio station in Boston, and if you don't like their values, tune to another station. That's that big knob, you know, the one that makes it go from one station to another, just reach for that one and turn it. If you're afraid of rock and roll lyrics, buy records that have no lyrics at all. There's plenty of classical music or instrumental music or jazz, and you don't want your children exposed to even the slightest possibility of a lyric that somebody else might think is okay, but you might think is a little bit going too far. then avoid it altogether. Nobody forces anyone to buy this music or to listen to the radio stations who broadcast it.
All right, but at the very same time, I don't know who amongst this crowd is going to trade in Prince for Brahms or something to get away from the lyrics. Steve, you wanted to be involved before. Go ahead, stand up.
Well, first of all, I'm not for sexist or violent lyrics, but I think the intent here is who's to decide who's wrong or who's right or who's perfect or who's nasty. The implications here are the problem we have. A group of people here are supposed to determine what we're supposed to listen to, and they're supposed to label it, and it's the labeling here that creates the problem. Now, what we're going to say is that, now I listen to the Velvet Underground per se, and their lyrics to you, I guarantee, would be just as worse as Judas Priest, and yet their intents are drastically opposite, practically. But the point being is that you'd put them in the same labeling. And why not put Catcher in the Rye in the same labeling? Or Upon Julia's Breast, which is in Norton's Anthology of Poetry, in the same labeling? Why don't we just all label it together? And that's the problem. You cannot do that. And who's the person to decide to do that? And when you get into that point, then you're setting up a system which is dictated by an oligarchy, and that's not right.
Steve came prepared, I can tell you this. Sally, go ahead. Go ahead.
Steve, I want to say that we're talking about young children. That's been our concern. Very young children. That's why these four mothers got together originally, because we do have young children, and there's a big difference in what young children are exposed to and older. And we've had psychiatrists and psychologists who have told us this. As a matter of fact, Jimi Hendrix, the late Jimi Hendrix, said, music is a spiritual thing. You can hypnotize people with music. When you get them at their weakest point, you can preach anything in the subconscious that you want to.
All right. Well, I understand that Frank is leaving us. Frank Zappa?
Yep.
You're on your way out. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
You take care of yourself.
Yeah, bye-bye.
All right. Frank Zappa is leaving us, but we will be right back. We got more audience discussion and some of our guests, too. Come on back.